um, there could be a possibility that you're going to move Casablanca Village from Walk Canyon to Castleview High School? I want to hear from your own work.
Yes. Director Long, thank you for the question. So Paula Hands in Communications Department, myself and Derek Sturz were interviewed. And at that point, it was even more preliminary than it is now. We did not have any scenarios finalized even for consideration. So we simply discussed the process without mentioning any name of a school, feeder, or planning area. And that the concern of that area with those particular schools, I think the order of that communication was not totally as general as we discussed, so I think they got misinterpreted and led to unfortunate misunderstanding because there's no scenario that would move any student that's in an existing housing from Rock Canyon to Castleview. In Castleview, we have 8 mobiles. We have significant capacity issues there, so we want to minimize the impact on capacity in that feeder, and hence, thanks to the voters, we're constructing an FPOD to do that very same thing in Castleview. So that's the background.
Other questions? Director Meek?
So thank you again for all the work. Being new to the Long Range Planning Committee, I'm getting up to speed, and this is a big project. So I just think it's helpful to remind ourselves what the goals are, and I just want to reiterate what I think I've heard for this. We want to utilize each of our school buildings to full capacity. We want to minimize overcrowding. We want to provide all students with comfortable, effective learning environments and continuing to be responsible stewards of taxpayer dollars. Just want to confirm that that's accurate. And then I think we heard a couple of public comments earlier this evening, and I don't know if you were in the room, Mr. Bingham. One dealt with whether we could use open enrollment policy to address any of these issues for overcrowding, and I'm not sure that I see that addressed in the documentation here. Another question that came up was around year-round schooling, which is something that we used to offer in our district. So I think being able to speak to whether that was an option or why it wasn't an option considered would be helpful. Those are the first two, and I have a little bit more, but I'll stop there.
All right. Who would like to address those questions? Sure. Mr. Bingham.
So regarding open enrollment, I've done a policy search of all the districts in the state, or at least the top 20 districts, and I've provided that to staff, and we're exploring it. But obviously, in every one of these schools, we have a certain number of students who open enroll in and a certain number of students who open enroll out, both from inside of the district and from outside of the district. So it's typically a standard school district behavior if you get a school that's super crowded to close it to out-of-district enrollment. And so I was working with Lewis Palmer board members this morning, and that's a district where they've done that twice during the current school year. So, you know, that is kind of a standard feature. The extent to which you deploy that is a board decision, obviously. But we had that come from the survey data, and on the fourth bullet on page 3, it identifies that we are considering that, and that could provide some available seats depending upon the extent to which you would consider pursuing that. I have done no further evaluation of the extent to which that would affect our circumstances. Regarding your second question regarding 4-track, during the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats process, I think we only had 2 references to the idea of reinstituting year-round schooling in any of our facilities. And currently, I don't think there are any schools in the state of Colorado that are currently on year-round. So Cherry Creek phased its last school off 24 months ago, I think, and I was involved in that. I've been involved in year-round schooling conversions and discontinuance off and on for 30 years. And so I kind of watched the issue, but currently we don't have any in the state. So we did not pursue it because it did not flow out of the SWOT process and therefore was not considered in the community survey because it wasn't of key interest to the stakeholders in the SWOT process.
So do you need additional information from the board in order to move forward with evaluating the open enrollment policies that could potentially mitigate needing to change boundaries or make some of these changes?
I would defer to the superintendent and staff regarding how they would like to proceed on that. I'm your servant, and I, would want to defer to how we would consider that. So I would ask Dr. Tucker to respond to that.
Well, all of the options are open, and we'll certainly rely heavily on the board and the long-range planning committee for every scenario. I think the board has requested that we bring all scenarios to them, so that's an area we can explore.
Okay.
I believe I speak for the board when I say we certainly stand ready to look for recommendations of policy changes that we could do to help with this process. So I think there's an openness, and we're hoping that that would be part of your scope of work, is to make those recommendations to us. So,
And in addition to policy changes, it also has to be a cultural change, because for a period of time when we were utilizing a business model to attract students, and we obviously stayed off the ballot for 12 years, that put our neighborhood schools in competition with each other. And sadly to say, mobiles, and I know that's probably a question that's going to come up tonight, how mobiles fit into this. Mobiles were used as a resource, student resource generator to get more students in. And I want to get back to this whole question, and Shannon, you can help us with this as well, because you looked at funding. In Colorado and probably every state, money follows the student, which means that if a student from outside of the district comes and fills a seat, that money, that state money, follows the student. And so because money was tight in our district, we relied heavily on that and helping our folks move from this cultural understanding of practice of having to attract more students to keep their schools viable and open, and also have money, because we're a site-based district. So there's a policy portion of that. There's also a cultural practice point as well. Did you find that in your survey and your multitude of talks with folks?
I don't think we had a lot of specific references to the whole open enrollment issue. I think there is a equilibrium amount of in and out that happens in this school district, and my projection is based upon the continuance of those equilibrium amounts of in and out. And that is about 4,400 students across the district, so it's a pretty significant number when you look at it. And if we were to cut a significant amount of that movement, we're looking at a pretty significant budgetary effect on the district.
Correct.
Of those students not coming. So most of these considerations, as we look at them, unfortunately defer to that fact, basically, that every district in the state has an equilibrium between students imported and students exported, and most of my clients prefer to try to keep those as stable as possible because they have a very significant impact on the budgetary circumstances of the districts affected.
Thank you. I think that's helpful to hear. The other thing that I would mention, though, there are also costs with, if you look at the north part of our district, we have, we're looking at scenarios where we need to close schools potentially because we have too many schools that were placed in that area. So, I mean, there are costs to all of the choices that we make. So I think having the data to analyze will help us decide what the best, decisions would be in that regard. did you want to respond to that?
I just want to clarify, during our vetting with the school principals, it was discussed to consolidate and repurpose because the consolidation was driven by site-based budget to make it a viable budget for the school. And the repurposing was driven by the need for alternative spaces to avoid cost of new construction. That was the limit of the discussion, to consolidate and repurpose.
Thank you.
And Director
Thanks.
Meek, if I could, if we can go down the dais and we'll get back to you, Director Chancho Shore, and then we'll just walk the dais and make sure everybody gets a chance to voice a concern or
Thank you.
question.
That was an incredible amount of effort and work. Thank you so much. I do remember in the survey, the same question regarding modulars was on the same, in the exact same question said new buildings. So in many circumstances, I'm wondering about the assumption when we mark yes, modulars or new building, that's an assumption people are going to we want to explore. Modulars are different, it's a different question than new buildings. So I'm just wondering about, as we're having our meetings around in the community, can we really dig deeper into that question, modulars, new buildings? New buildings cost a completely different amount of money, and really, is that a possibility? So when people were answering that question, were they answering for modulars or new buildings? And then the other question I do have, and I could give you a list of pros and cons for year-round schools, but if we didn't yet explore with the parent community around year-round schools, and I can understand why, because it doesn't really come up, I would like to pursue what people think about that after they have some data or information about what that means. I know, I don't know for sure what you would come back with. In lots of circumstances, and in my experience, people loved A and B track and weren't as popular with C and D track. So, and however, it could be, there are many schools, and many that are impacted that you're talking about, that literally were built for a year-round system. So I'd like to also dig a little deeper into some information about that as well. And I know that there are associated costs with year-round school, considering the amount of time administrators and building personnel need to be in the building and how you can't repair a building, all of those pieces. So we would have to look at that as well. But I'd like to look at those two things a little bit deeper.
All right. Director Graziano, any questions or comments? Director Hansen? Director Holtzman?
But I had a little more time. I was revising my notes, but thank you all for the work that you put into this. Our consultant, our staff, our long-range planning committee, and I have had the privilege of being at the long-range planning committees as one of the board's liaisons, and I know the hard work that you've all put into this, so I really appreciate it. I did want to follow up a little bit on the request for recommendations about possible policy changes. Concur with the question about open enrollment policies, and also just wanted to mention that I would really hope that we could at least discuss or get some recommendations from our experts regarding mobiles, and also a vision for our middle school grade configuration. I think some of that could be I would really like to have more discussion and more feedback about what is an optimal learning environment for students of that age. I know I've talked to a lot of educators, and I have an opinion based on having talked to many, many educators, but I think that would be important for our community to know, recognizing that, I think as Director Meek said, we have financial constraints. But to have a vision about what optimally we would like to have someday, even if it means a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, I think that'd be helpful as we make shorter term decisions, to have that vision as to what is optimal. So I would request that we take a look at that. And so then I have kind of a specific set of questions to kind of illustrate some of those points that I just asked for. And it involves the possible scenarios in the chaparral feeder. Basically, there's the first, I believe, 3 or 4 that would involve boundary changes that would look at resolving an overcrowded, particularly one overcrowded or overcapacity elementary school being Prairie Crossing. However, those scenarios, and correct me if I'm wrong, don't look at the other issue in the chaparral feeder area, which is under capacity at Sierra Middle School, which is projected to be even more under capacity as time goes on. So I guess part of this is going to be comment, and then I'm going to get to my questions. But questions being, I guess I'm wondering why ultimately the 2 different scenarios basically aren't more equally being reviewed and presented to the public. And some of this involves things like, for instance, the boundary proposals would move 6th graders from one very overcapacity elementary school to 3 other elementary schools, 2 of which are already overcapacity and predicted to continue to be that way. The 3rd one being at capacity and continued. So I just have some concerns about, especially in this feeder area, whether we are thinking long-term about optimal solutions for our students. And it does involve things like use of mobiles, and also things like enrollment policies and vision for our middle school configuration. And especially considering that the survey data showed that 70% of parents, and I believe students, and I'm not sure about staff, in the chaparral feeder area were positive and in support of a 6 through 8 configuration. So, but based on that, I do have some specific questions. Would it be possible to move all 6th graders to Sierra Middle School at one time?
Do you want to start with that question, Mr. Bingham? Or?
Sure, portables would be required. I think there are 4 outboard classrooms, 2 doubles, 5 pads, 1 double portable there, 2 outboard classrooms. So in order to facilitate that, we would need to add additional portable space to that school, at least for the short term. Those scenarios that you're referring to all depend upon a more balanced use of portable classrooms in that feeder. So instead of having significant spikes, we know we could accommodate students by having a more distributed use of portable classrooms among the schools affected. But obviously, removing the 6th grade would be a comprehensive solution for the elementary schools in the feeder. And there's just not, those empty seats don't exist at Sierra now, and there would be the need to continue to operate with students outside of the permanent building.
So one other question I have is, do we have potential sources of one-time revenue that might support building modifications to Sierra if that was what was determined to be optimal over the long term? And knowing that we do have bond tier 1 work coming up in the summer of '21, if we could, would that even be a possibility that we could think out that far, that if that's what the community decided and that's what you recommended, that's what the board approved, if it might even be possible to make those modifications to Sierra?
Mr. Cosgrove.
So thank you for the question. If we look back, in 2009, when 6th grade was moved to Sagewood and Cimarron, the cost of the facility mods depends on the number of available seats and the programming that has to be created in spaces that needs to be modified. So in Cimarron, I believe we spent about $250,000. And at one point, we had 1,350 students in that school, closer to 1,400, I think. Whereas in Sagewood, we didn't have that issue. So Sagewood was near zero cost, very minimal. Whereas Cimarron, it was significant. So if one were to estimate, it could be anywhere from $0 to $250,000 for a middle school to house sixth grade. It depends on how that building is being used and how the student pods migrate through. For example, Mesa Middle School, we're looking at less than $100,000 to move 200 kids in there. So another thing is Sierra is on well, and so to bring water and sewer to that facility may be needed if we exceed the 5 mobile pads. At one point, there were 5 mobiles there, and the well sufficed with the water, and we've added some cisterns. But in the long term, we may have that additional cost. As far as the bond, all of the bond is either capital renewal or new construction. There's, and except for CTE and Alt Ed and the Innovation Center, it's repairing things that are there, and that's 100% of the Tier 1 and approximately 50% by value of the Tier 2. So there's cash in lieu funds that could be used, and then any other funds with respect to potential land that isn't needed for other reasons and other discussions.
So I appreciate that, just having the information and making sure that if in fact I'm hearing you correctly, that it is a viable scenario, that it would require different things than boundary changes, but it is viable. And I'm sure that that's why all of these are on the list, is because that they are. So I wanted to finish with one more thing, and I think I might be losing my train of thought here. Only just to say that the reason I brought up the bond in the summer of '21 is because I thought that if that was something that was recommended, perhaps those changes could be made at the same time as that construction. So anyway, I appreciate you answering my questions and considering all of this. So.
Mr. Knight, did you have a comment?
Just one on the chaparral feeder move to sixth grade. If we move all of them, there could be the unintended consequence of creating a couple very small schools in the chaparral feeder. As you see through most of these scenarios, the main concern about moving sixth grade to middle school is making some of our elementary schools smaller, and then we've got a bit of an issue there. That's why some of those might not have been voted as popular as we might think, because although like a Prairie Crossing could use that relief, you have other schools like a Cherokee Trail that may make it very difficult for them to continue the programming they've been accustomed to. So it's just a unintended consequence possibly.
Director Long, any questions, comments?
Yes. Again, thank you very much for your work. I have the honor of visiting Cherry Valley Elementary, and it's a wonderful school, and is severely under capacity. And I do not see in this plan to address the situations for this school or moving some student over there. I was under the impression that they would like to go up to 8th grade. Currently, they're stopped at 6th grade, and they have been asking for that as a way to boost their enrollment. And they said that a lot of their parents will love to keep their kid over there. And I'm just wondering how come this school is not being addressed in this plan.
I wasn't asked specifically to explore that carefully. Cherry Valley is a combination of a historic permanent building and a Schedule I mobile, meaning it's an 8-classroom multiplex portable building. Could we operate a K-8 there? Yes, probably, but it would be very mixed grade level. It would not be terribly consistent with the standard course offerings in the district, to the best of my knowledge, and it would probably be fairly expensive to do so. I would defer to other staff to respond further, but could we append some areas to that attendance area? Yes, but it's a very unique environment because of its size, and I think that we would have a fairly complex conversation if we were trying to clip off the edge of Castle Rock and assign it, because those families would be used to a suburban school environment, larger environment. So, I don't know how viable that would be. I would defer to staff regarding the idea of any sort of configuration change there. It wasn't suggested through the feeder meetings as a definitive scenario.
I think Mr. Knight had a comment about specifically that.
Yes, Director Ray, we've talked several times as staff about K-8s, and this is not a new issue with Cherry Valley wanting to go K-8. You start to get into highly qualified issues and trying to find middle school teachers who are qualified to teach the 4 core areas of language arts, math, science, and social studies. So becomes a bit of an issue trying to find one teacher, because if you've got 40 kids in K through 6, you're not going to have very many kids in middle school. So you're going to have to find one teacher who can teach all 4 of those subjects at a deep level. So that becomes difficult. So it's mainly a staffing issue.
Director Meek? One last thing, Director Long?
And I would like to have a comment. And I have kid in 4-track, and some parents love it because they can schedule vacations when nobody go to vacations. So, but what I'm saying is that, and also the district is looking at find a way to improve the salary for our teachers. 4-track, from my understanding, it could potentially, cut costs and house more students. So the board set specifically all options open. So I also would like to see how this could pay out in terms of saving the district money.
All right, thank you. Director Meek?
So my last thought really was what Director Holtzman mentioned around the 6th grade philosophy, and I think that's really important, and how that aligns with our strategic plan. And if there's a way to have a systemic way that we address middle school would be something really helpful to see. I had the honor of seeing some engagement process at a neighboring district with a fellow long-range planning committee member, and was really impressed with the process that you use specifically. And I know a lot of work has gone into this by the committee and all of you. Thank you. And I know there's a lot of work to come because the engagement process is what's starting. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Meek. I did have one, sorry, I didn't get a chance to ask my question. But one of the questions I have, I know that one of the scenarios is to relocate EDCSD into a middle school. And I know I already kind of muffed the message a little bit by saying that we weren't doing any of these things till 21, other than the 6th grade reconfiguration. But I would tell you this EDCSD issue is urgent. We have them in a facility that's unacceptable. And so I don't know what we need to do, what the board needs to do to make sure, and I'm not even sure the right solution is moving them into a middle school, to be honest with you. I'm very interested in one-time dollars, providing a lease so that we at least accommodate them for a year, and then we kind of have more time to figure out, what another scenario is. But to me, if there's one of these that I feel like we've got kids in situations that they should not be in, it's our EDCSD. And I know we've got Bridges and we've got the support center as well, but they're at least in a place where the toilets actually are, acceptable for the size of the kids. And so I'm wondering where we are with that, because I just feel like that's a sense of urgency for those kids in particular. Do we have a plan for this fall to relocate that program?
So we will continue to aggressively research that. The plan is we will discuss as a result of school capacity boundary analysis, the viability of any options within this scenario. So staff will research that. The other option is to lease or purchase, and that was tied to obtaining one-time funds, which was tied to a process to dispose sites, which is taking time. So that unfortunately is taking a bit of time. because our priority has been the school capacity boundary analysis. And right now, we are receiving appraisals for the surplus sites that the board declared as surplus, but we don't have all the appraisals yet. And we're working with another one of our consultants and general and outside counsel to develop the process. It gets down to entitlement, and there are many issues. It would seem easy from the outside, but it's pretty complicated in order to have the process, in order to bring a sell price to the board for that. So we are working that, but that's taken longer than we expected.
Appreciate that, and I would just say if this board needs to pass a resolution to say E EDSCD will be in a different location for fall, I'm more than happy to carry that resolution forward. But I hear the angst in terms of the things that you guys are trying to figure out creatively to make this happen. But I would tell you that I feel very strongly that we've got kids in a situation that we shouldn't expect any child to be in. So you let me know if we need, and I speaking without discussion, and I'd be really glad to have board discussion about that, but I feel pretty strongly that we need to move forward and guarantee that there's a different location for them in the fall. So, Director Chanchashore?
Just the last thing I'm thinking about is how do we assure that we are addressing any unintended consequences? So, for example, if we move 2 schools of 6th graders to 1 middle school, but the other 5 schools of 6th graders don't go to the middle school, what are the unintended consequences? The programming differences, the equity of choice differences, the different things. The 6th graders that go to the middle school get to choose, all the middle school options, whereas the 6th graders who are not there. So we just have to think about what are the unintended consequences of all the different choices and the ripple effects of the choices that are being presented.
Totally understand. And on those, in the notes, there's some specific notes about trying to avoid and proactively forecast those unintended consequences. And transportation's real. And every one of those scenarios, not every one of them, some are within walking zones, but there's either temporary or permanent busing implications. And that's why Shannon Bingham looked at the urgent scenarios to try to hit some of the low-hanging fruit, because, as was discussed, perhaps it's phased based on the ability of funding.
Very good. Director Holtzman?
I just had a question, because I know we have 3 long-range planning members that have been here a really long time, and I wanted to make sure that if they had any additional comments, I know we're on time, I know it's late, but
We turn
just,
the mic over to Brad, and
and they
we're
may
not going
not,
to go home till midnight.
they may not have any comments, but I just thought briefly, we might want to give them that
Well, and
opportunity.
I think certainly this topic is not just done tonight. I mean, we certainly, I would say, Mr. Bingham and Planning Department, we certainly are impressed with your analysis, the work you've done with the LRPC, and we certainly support you moving forward with doing your community outreach meetings, and then looking forward to a follow-up meeting to kind of see where you are with that. So I think we're in a good place to close this, Mrs. Holtz, Director Holtzman. Dr. Tucker, final word?
Yes, I certainly share, and the team shares the urgency to get adequate space for EDCSD. But we need to understand where the board is in terms of priorities, because we're also looking at compensation and we're looking at other things. And obviously, to make that move next year, it's certainly going to cost money. So if we can get a better idea in terms of where that is, and I know it's a top priority, and it's been a priority the board has been talking about for the last 2 years, but looking at compensation and other interests, where is that in terms of what we need to be addressing, and we can have, and where staff should be putting their energies.
Sure. All right. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda. Thank you, one and all, for your time and efforts. We're moving on to the next agenda item, which is to consider a resolution for responding to the State Board of Education's written determination and order to revoke the charter of Hope Online Academy Elementary School for the at the end of the 1920 school year. This resolution also proposes an amendment to their contract to continue to serve students grades 6 through 12. Mr. Windsor?
Great. Thank you and good evening again, Board of Directors. Wanted to have an opportunity to provide some more context to the State Board order as well. Also wanted to let you know we have Hope representation here as well. So if there's any additional questions, they're here to partner with us in this process as well, which they've been a great partner in as well. We did want to provide you an update regarding Hope Online Elementary School after the State Board of Education hearings that occurred in January and February. To give you a little more context around Hope Online Academy in its entirety, just want to give you a little more context to it as well so we understand how Hope Online Elementary fits in this process. Hope Online Learning Academy has been a DCSD charter since 2007. It's been a multi-district online blended learning school. It's had its charter renewed on 3 separate occasions within Douglas County School District in 2013, 2018, and 2019. 2013, it was actually divided into 3 parts within one contract. That divided parts was the elementary, which is K through 5, middle school 6 through 8, high school 9 through 12, which is currently an AEC. In 2018, they received a 1-year renewal. 2019, they received a conditional 2-year renewal in alignment with their pathways plan for the elementary. But again, when we renewed it, it was for the K-12 schooling as well. Hope Online Elementary School has been on the clock due to state performance ratings for the past 9 years and have been in a turnaround plan type and most recently for the past 4 years in priority improvement plan, which means they need to also fulfill a pathways plan to help remediate some of their academic scores that were there. And the State Board of Education in January 2020 wanted to review the progress of their plan and review the state review panel report and review their findings because Hope was still on the clock. After the January and February State Board of Education hearings, the State Board of Ed directed the Douglas County School District Board to take action under statute and revoke or reform its contract with Hope such that Hope is no longer authorized to operate a K through 5 elementary school. That includes roughly 846 students, which potentially can impact upwards of 11 learning centers. We are currently working in partnership with Colorado Department of Education as well as with Hope on fulfilling those orders, which also talks about completing a closure plan, which is due March 30th of this particular month. We have given you a draft version of what that plan looks like. We are in compliance with the statutory law in the sense of that closure plan as well, and are currently in progress in meeting every other week to which we've already assigned parts, timelines as well to this to make sure that one, we have a closure plan that we can submit, which we feel comfortable with, but also we know it does not have to, the closure plan does not have to be completed by March 30. We just need to make sure we're submitting a closure plan. To give additional context as well, Hope Online will be going for their middle school and high school charter renewal next year. And so a lot of those questions for the middle school and high school will be next year. Currently, their middle school is on an improvement plan type. And then with their AEC, they're at a performance level plan type with their AEC. And so we'll provide further information going into next year about their charter renewal, which will be looking at that 2-year conditional renewal we had for them. You also received a document as well outlining some of the details in this as well, but wanted to have a chance to answer any questions you may have for myself or for Hope, as well as Laura Gorman, who's been an incredible resource in this process as well, as we look at different title fundings, purchase services, and a variety of things as well.
Thank you, Mr. Windsor, for that. Directors, any questions regarding the brief summary that Mr. Windsor gave us, or any other things about the resolution that you're wondering about? Director Lung?
I did not see the resolutions mentioned about after we close elementary school, what happened to the middle school and the high school, what kind of financial viability and things like that?
Yep.
Those are going to be the second part of these that we look at. So today we're just dealing with the elementary.
So we are just talking about elementary. However, you make a very good point. That's actually a part of our closure plan part of the closure plan really makes sure that we were revising and reviewing any revised budgets that are going to be necessary as well to talk about the financial health and sustainability and viability as well. We had a very encompassing team that's meeting every other week from our business services, which also includes our finance, grant coordination, HR, SDIS, choice programming, systems performance as well, all giving feedback with this particular team as well as with Heather. And her team have been extremely proactive in making sure they've connected with each of the schools that were impacted around students have to go back to potentially residing districts, where they've even identified key folks from Hope to help coordinate to make sure all students are taken care of in this process as well. But a part of that is making sure that a revised budget will be submitted. It's actually built into our data submission timeline for us to review the revised budget. So that will be an active part of the process.
Directors, any other questions for Mr. Windsor? Director Meek?
Mr. Windsor, did you say it was 800 students that are impacted
Roughly 846
at that elementary level?
in their multiple learning centers at
Okay.
the elementary level. That's correct.
And I don't think those numbers were included in the enrollment projections, right, for the charter?
From what I heard, that was
Okay.
something they did not factor that into that.
Okay, thank you.
Correct, yes.
Other questions? All right. So just a couple of quick comments. One is that this board was certainly committed to the 2-year contract renewal that we did and the pathways plan. And we just want to acknowledge the work, Heather, of your team, Laura Gorman, all of you folks that have worked so hard to really do what's best for kids. So do want to just acknowledge that this truly isn't the board coming with this decision. It really is response to a board that's higher than us asking us to revoke the contract. And so just want to make sure that's clear as well. And then with that, I would just entertain a motion for approving the resolution. Yes, Director
They're not really
Chancha-Shore?
asking us, they're telling us to
Yes.
revoke.
Correct. That's correct. Director Meek?
I think this board really is committed to opportunity for all. And so personally, I would love to hear feedback from Hope Online, not right now, it's 10 o'clock, but written feedback or sitting down having coffee or anything, but I would love to have that kind of feedback on your perspective on what could be done differently. Thank you.
Thank you,
To
Mr.
give
Windsor.
additional information, I will say Hope has been a great partner in that constant communication about different ways to explore to have a greater impact. So thank you for mentioning that.
All right.
I move to adopt the motions as written.
Second.
Okay, motion made to approve the resolution as written by Lung, seconded by Holtzman. Any further discussion? Director Chancha-Shore?
One comment, the comment being, for the State Board of Education to tell a local control school board, I just find it interesting to speak out the two sides of our mouth. School board from Colorado.
Would you like that sealed and sent to the State Board of Education, that comment? All right. Director Holtzman?
I just want to say one thing. I appreciate you sharing, and I'm not at all surprised that you all are working individually with each of your affected students to make sure that they are ending up in a place that is good for them. And so I just really appreciate that, and I'm confident that Mr. Windsor and our staff are helping if that's needed. So thank you for doing that.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's vote. Chancha-Shore?
Aye.
Graziano?
Aye.
Hanson?
I can see the emotion on each of your faces, and this is hurting my heart to say yes. I can tell how much you genuinely cared, and you genuinely cared for each and every one of those children. So thank you, and my vote is yes.
Holtzman?
Aye.
Lung?
Aye.
Meek?
Aye.
Ray is aye as well. All right, very good, thank you. Again, we will look forward to working with Hope with the grade 6 through 12. But again, thank you one and all for all your efforts and time. All right, moving on to our next item on the agenda is another resolution that we worked on earlier at our work session, but this resolution has been the result of certainly conversation that we've had regarding this compensation process, as well as really trying to be clear as a board in terms of the direction and guidelines we want to be, that we want to make sure that our staff understands as we get closer to looking at recommendations for a compensation system. I would just highlight a couple things of this resolution. One is that certainly the resolution fits with the resolution we passed in December 2018 about improving our compensation system to become more of a predictable compensation system. This resolution also talks about the progressively getting better in terms of making our compensation more competitive. It's certainly not an expectation that this happens after night, but certainly it's the encouragement that we're moving in the right direction, that we want it to be comparative, and that we have certainly see that our community supports it as well, and that the board has continually taken steps to improve the compensation of our staff for the last 4 years. And I want to just again emphasize that, as it was been said tonight, $60 million, approximately $60 million or more has been invested in compensation since 2016. I also just want to emphasize that with the MLO, that $17 million was committed to pay gaps. And I want to say that publicly because I think, again, there's this myth out there that says that MLO was supposed to cure everything. And we did not do that. We did not write that into our ballot to say this was the cure-all. We did this to say we have pay gaps that we wanted to have addressed. And that $17 million did address a number of our employees. And so I took a little offense to the statement that the MLO has done nothing or that this board has done nothing. This board has been very committed to improving conditions for employees as well as investing additional dollars for compensation as well. So I just want to emphasize that in this resolution. I also want to emphasize this, and Director Lung, I think you were not at the work session when I emphasized this, but that we recognize there's significant financial constraints and that we need to make considerations for potential recessions. We recognize that that's something that we have to be able to consider as well. So this resolution really asks our staff to consider the following, that whatever recommendations brought to us aligns to the resolution we passed in December 2018 about what was really a reflection of what staff were telling us that they valued in a compensation system, was what that resolution was all about. We also wanted to make sure that there were plenty of opportunities for engagement, input, and reaction regarding whatever is recommended to us in May. We also wanted to make sure that it's fiscally responsible, that it's sustainable, and that we recognize that this is not a problem that we can just cure overnight for the upcoming school year. It's going to take stages to actually get us to a place where we feel like is the desired state. And then also that we wanted to make sure that ultimately always, whenever a recommendation is made, that there's no adverse impact to our students. And we certainly put the responsibility on our superintendent to bring to us a recommendation that he feels he can support as well. So that's the nature of the resolution tonight. Board, any questions or comments you want to make after our work session that we had at 5 o'clock? Director Lung?
Again, I appreciate, the thought of putting a resolutions together, which we've never done it before, to clarify what this board want. There's a couple of things I would like to see happening in these resolutions. Financial sustainability and affordability, I believe, is very important as a custodian of the public dollars. So I would love to add the word affordability. Why not in the third bullet, in addition to sustainability, to make sure that whatever come up is affordable by the school district. And also, while the board is consider all options is open, to make sure that we we're going to have a very equitable financial system in the long, carrying forward. So when we saying that we are going to, there's evidence that all individual who will be impacted by the decisions has offered opportunity for engagement, input, and reactions. I would also love to see our professionals, organizations will be on the table getting consulted, because after all, we want all the input, not only from the individual, but from any organizations that representing our teacher, our classified employee, our bus driver. They should be on the table to give their input also.
So one question I have for you, Director Lung, we have fiscally responsible in that third bullet, and I felt like that encompasses affordability. So I'm not sure calling out affordability is necessarily necessary there, but certainly would, if you have a clarification why you feel that word is a stronger word, and/or would ask other directors if that's a word they want in there as well. So I'm not hearing any reaction to that, and then I guess Director Lung, I'm sorry, Director Lung?
I just want to see, let you know why I want to put that word in there, because
Okay.
that word is specifically in Scott Smith's presentation.
Is it specifically what?
In Scott Smith's presentations, before he left us, the presentations that he has in the February 4th meeting. And he lists out 4 or 5 single work in there. That is one of the work that he specifically putting down there. So that's why I want to honor his thought. And I with financial background, also think that affordability is very, very important. That's the reason why I want to add that word over there. I can pull up the slides that.
No, it's fair. I hear. Thank you for that clarification. Director Holtzman?
I just looked up synonyms for affordable, and they're cheap, economical, low cost, modest, cost effective. I mean, I think that fiscally responsible covers cost effective. I don't have a huge issue with adding affordable, although I don't want to say that we want to do something that's cheap or low cost or modest or thrifty. But cost effective and responsible, I think, is accurate.
Other reactions to this resolution or other comments to be made? So I would ask if there is a motion and there's a revision to the resolution, the wording, that you would add that into your motion.
Move to approve the motion as is.
Move to approve the resolution as is.
Resolution as is.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made by Director Graziano to accept the resolution as written, seconded by Holtzman. Any further discussion?
I would like to amend the motions. As I said, if you look at Scott Smith's slide on the February 4th, agenda item number 17, and slide number 20.
So Director Lung, can you state what your amended motion is?
I would like to add the word affordability in the third bullet that say options/recommendations are fiscally responsible, sustainable, allowed for multi-years phase-in. Again, I respect Scott a lot, and there's a reason why he specifically put out that work over there.
Okay.
And
Gotcha.
so
So motion to amend the motion's been made by Director Lung. Is there a second? All right, seeing no second, that motion doesn't move forward, so we're back to the original motion, which is to accept the resolution as written. It's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Director Lung?
I also want to add amended the second bullet, who say that there is evidence that all individuals who will be impacted by the decisions has been offered opportunity for engagement. I would like to change it so that there's evidence that all individual and affected employee organizations will be offered the opportunity for engagement. So in addition to individual, I would like to add the work, after all, we do have a union contract with the bus driver. That is that is a contract that is already written. So I think the professional organizations should have a place in these consultations.
So Director Lung, if I'm hearing you right, you are making a motion to amend the motion now to include additional wording regarding professional organizations in that second bullet.
Correct. Second bullet is I would like to add professional organizations in addition to all individuals.
So an a motion to amend the motion has been made by Director Lung to add professional organizations in the second bullet. Is there a second? Okay, seeing that there's no second, that motion also does not carry forward. Back to the main motion, which is to adopt the resolution as written. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, let's vote. Chancho Shore.
Aye.
Graziano.
Aye.
Hanson.
Aye.
Holtzman.
Aye.
Lung.
I will know just because of the two amendments that I want to add. I believe will make the resolutions, much better.
Sure, thank you. Director Meek.
Aye.
Director Ray is an aye. That motion passes 6-1. Directors, given the time, I know we have several policies, second reading, but I would entertain a motion to postpone
So moved.
specific to another date.
Second.
Okay, that motion was approved by, or made by Chancho Shore, seconded by Holtzman. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, let's vote. Chancho Shore. Graziano.
Aye.
Hanson.
Aye.
Holtzman.
Aye.
Lung.
Aye.
Meek.
Aye.
Ray, aye. That will be postponed until March 24th. Next are board reports, and just real quickly, again, just the upcoming dates. Agenda planning meeting is scheduled for this Friday at 10 o'clock. I also want to note that Director Meek and I are meeting with Sarah Curto tomorrow at 3:30, and I just want to pause really quickly. I assume that's just the two of us. If for some reason somebody else wants to join us, we need to make sure that meeting gets noticed. So I just want to make sure that no one else, and that Director Meek and I will bring back to the 24th meeting a proposal for the agenda for our work session on April 11th. And also would just ask your input, not tonight, but whether or not we want to be here with that full day session, if we want to go off-site. I know Director Holtzman has offered her place. In Breckenridge, it's free of cost if we wanted to go off-site somewhere, but certainly doing it here is advantageous because it doesn't cost extra. And then just a reminder that March 18th is the partnership of Douglas County governments at 7 o'clock for breakfast. Just always a good time to hear from our other elected counterparts. And if you do have questions about the policies, Mrs. Clemish, is it best to direct those to Mr. Condon if we have questions regarding the policies that we postponed tonight, or to you? What would you prefer?
You can direct them to Mr. Condon or to both of us. It doesn't
right.
matter. We'll be consulting, I'm sure, with any questions that might come our way.
All right. And just one other future item, board, to be thinking about is whether or not we want to have the conversation around about a lobbyist, since we're encroaching into a budget year that doesn't require us to set aside a lot of funds for election purposes. We need to have a conversation about whether or not we want to restore a contract with a lobbyist that would help us with legislative kinds of issues. So I would just put that on your burner to digest as well. That's all I have. Other board director reports? Chancho Shore?
Quite a long conversations and several conversations about DAC membership. But because it's 10 o'clock, I'm going to turn it over to Susan.
Director Meek.
That's called payback. All right, so we have had several conversations regarding DAC membership. And so there's a lack of clarity in the bylaws when it comes to a few things in regards to in regards to membership. What is clear is that you have 11 voting members as a minimum with, 6 parent reps, 2 teacher reps, 1 school administrator, and at least 1 community rep. An email went out from the district announcing board committees. About 15 people have responded, expressing an interest, even though the application has not officially been put out yet. So what isn't clear is whether a current sitting DAC member whose term is ending and who's eligible to continue on to another term needs to reapply and/or re-interview. What also isn't clear is whether when there's a change in status, so they're no longer a parent, they're completing their term, whether they need to reapply or re-interview to take on the role of a community rep. And then what else is not clear is how many positions exist for parents, teachers, community reps, since the bylaws say at a minimum, and currently right now there are 2 sitting community reps because there used to be 1, but the DAC allowed a parent to roll into a community position with which the board approved. So the membership committee isn't sure, are they looking for 2 community members or is it just 1 now that that 1 person's rolling off? So those are some of those issues that are unclear. What we've discussed is we want a very transparent process that anyone can understand what that process should look like, which would involve updating the bylaws. And that's a lengthy process. And so Director Chancho Shore and I were recommending that the DAC take on that process, but we need to address next year's membership. And so we asked for feedback from the DAC members. I think we received about 3 emails. And I'll try to, and we have not had a chance to talk about this, but I think there were 3 emails that I saw. And other conversations. What seems to be clear, everyone agreed, even at the DAC meeting, that if someone is reapplying or asked to re-interview, they would not serve on the membership committee that does the selection process. If someone is staying in the same role, so say a parent who wants to move on and do another 2-year term, they would be asked to reapply, but not re-interview. So basically, they put their name up saying, I'd like to continue on, I'm eligible to continue on to another 2-year term. That seems to be what people felt comfortable with, even with the email feedback that we received. For an individual, though, who is completing 1 role, looking to move into another role, the feedback that we received through email seemed to indicate that they really are not just rolling over, they're assuming a new role. And so I think that's probably the question we want to talk through the most.
Yeah, so what we were asking for an ability to move forward in allowing current sitting members who want to reapply to simply let the DAC know that they want to reapply, and then the DAC agrees to allow them to reapply or not. In the meantime, we would convene the bylaw committee throughout afterwards. But there is a member who would have to change positions, and we currently don't have an open community position. So our feedback indicates that member, should there be an opening for that position, or there are 2 other positions, this makes a 3rd opening, that the 12 people who have indicated their interest online and this other person would need to interview for those 3 positions. So 2 people intend to reapply, and then there would be 3 open positions where we have at least 12, if not 13 people interested in them, and they are currently sitting parent positions. So our question is, are you okay with moving forward and agree to allow us to move forward with that? Or do you want more involvement somehow in the process?
Director, so the wondering is if it's rolling over to the same position they're currently in, allowing that to occur until we have time to actually redefine the bylaws. And the only exception of not allowing that is if that person is trying to roll over to a new position. So directors, what are your thoughts? Director Holtzman?
I appreciate all the work that you've clearly done, and I concur with your recommendation.
Anyone opposed to our liaisons carrying forward that direction? All right, I don't see any opposition, so yes, I would agree with Director Holtzman. Thank you for thinking through that, and we'll look forward to cleaning up the bylaws after this year. All right, any other board reports? Director Lung, and then Director Holtzman. Sorry, and I skipped over Director Holtzman as Vice President, so, okay. Director Holtzman, you take, yeah.
Mine is really short. So I just wanted to make sure that we thank publicly Representative Baisley, who hosted us along with Casby at the Student Day at the Capitol. I think that was last week. And also appreciate that he has reached out to us in regards to questions that he's had with more than one piece of legislation. And I appreciate that he's seeking our input. As well as wanted to recognize Representative Crow and also Senator Bennett, who have recently reached out to the board to offer support and meet and greet opportunities. So just appreciate all that. And then finally, I just wanted to say that I've really enjoyed the student performances I've been able to see over the past couple of weeks. Most recently, the Continental League Honors Concert just reminds me exactly why I volunteered to and asked and appreciate the opportunity to serve as a board director. Not only as a group were they incredibly impressive, but I had the opportunity to speak with a student afterwards. We were actually riding the train back towards Douglas County together from one of our high schools who performed in that concert, and I just felt so grateful that we were offering opportunities like that to all of our students, and just was so impressed with him. So I'm glad that I've had those chances to remember why we all do this.
Very good, thank you, Director Holtzman. Director Lung?
In the last board meeting, I was asking for some guidance on the parent engagement, and I was hoping this will be on the board agenda today. So maybe I did not make that very clear what exactly do I want, because right now parent engagement is fall under the board. Well, not by board committee, but it's like internal superintendents committee or something like that. So it gives people wrong impressions that there is a committee, which we don't. So I think I need some guidance from the board on how to move forward, especially. There's some parents feel strongly that there should be some sort of independence mediator, so for that better work, other than the district employee, so that they will have another, they feel more comfortable, have another avenues to turn to. Those are the ones that I'm looking for, some guidance to see where does the board want me to go. Should I talking to our the superintendent's relations, which is Stacy Rader, to come up with something, then present to the board for approval. I'm just looking for general directions on that.
And I would tell you again, excuse me, Director Lung, the direction we gave you was to work with Stacy Rader to kind of figure out what it is that you are needing direction about, because I think we're unclear with that. So we would like to, given that Stacy is the parent engagement liaison, and you are the liaison from the board, I guess we need something more than just a general, what do you think, kind of discussion. So I think the direction we gave you at agenda planning was to have a discussion with Stacy and kind of come to us with something specific that you're needing direction on. So I would still suggest that would be
So
the
what
avenue.
specific that you want us to come up to or bring it to the board? I mean, it's a area that you want us to focus on before we come back to the board. Or are we focused on the third party or a person or groups that bring it back for suggestions, or do you want us to focus on how to implement the parent engagement a little bit further, more concrete? Just looking for general area that you want me to bring it back, or what you want me to talk to her about.
I would say that this board has not initiated the request for you to bring something, but you have initiated the idea that you want to bring something. So I would just say that whatever you feel like needs to be brought, because you're our liaison, just like our DAC did tonight, and a specific issue, they wanted to get feedback. So if you've got a specific issue and you've worked with Stacy Rader on it, then we're all ears to respond to the issue or focus that you're wanting us to give you feedback about. Does that make sense?
Okay.
All right. All right. Director Meek. Bless you.
At the risk of people throwing fruit at me, it's 10:30. I have two resolutions that I would love to get feedback on, and I will not spend too much time talking about it right now, but one is in regards to House Bill 1295, the Education Accountability and Accreditation Systems Audit Bill. This is a bill that is auditing CDE's accountability system. It's Other districts are looking to pass resolutions on that. It really is helping to take a look at whether the current system for grading public schools is working. Does the current framework provide constituents with a fair, complete, and accurate picture of school and district quality, among other areas? I know on the DAC, we struggle with participation rates sometimes with accountability, and I think taking a look at the accountability system might help provide confidence to our community that it is something they should be engaging more actively in. So I'll give everybody a draft copy. This is just a sample of all the accountability rules that have been passed over since 2008-9. And I haven't had a chance to run this by staff or not, but I will pass that out.
Director Meek, just a question. So are you looking for just feedback regarding that bill, or are you wanting to recommend a resolution that this board takes a position on the bill?
I'd like to get everyone's feedback on their level of support, and if there is interest, then I would like to bring it forward at the next board meeting.
So I would suggest if you can give us an executive summary of the points that you would like to have our feedback about first, that's certainly appropriate to send that out to board directors.
I will pass that out.
All right.
The second resolution that I'd like to get feedback on deals with reaffirming our policy governance framework. I really think talking about the framework that we want to use for governance is worthy of our time to ensure that we are staying in our lane and having clarity on what our role is. But I would like to also reestablish monitoring reports that were discontinued in 2011 under the Reform Board years. And so, again, this is a big topic. I'm throwing it out there because I'd like to just start the conversation to see the comfort level of other board members with moving forward in that direction. Thank you.
Sure. And I would just say, when we do our agenda planning on the 11th, let's make sure that that's a topic. And I think that then we look at the upcoming school year, if there's any changes, or if we're restoring some of the monitoring report kind of language that was suspended by a previous board. But I think that'd be a good place for us to start to get what you're asking for, is for all our voices to weigh in on that. So thank you. Any other board reports? So directors, so I'm kind of at a cross path with what we want to do tonight. Certainly we have a personnel matter that we do need to discuss in executive session, but I'm open because we're at the midnight hour. I've described that personal matter to you individually, and we can either postpone that conversation until the 24th and look for executive session time then, or we can just move forward and at least begin our executive session with that topic that I've expressed to you individually. What's the thoughts?
I move that we move to executive session.
So motion has, and I do want to just clarify before, so thank you for the motion. If we do move into executive session, let me just give some more directives regarding that. Because it is a personal matter, we are allowed to move into executive session according to CRS 24.6, 402, 4F. As required by statute, the employee who is the subject of this session has been notified and given the option to hold such discussion in an open meeting. And again, just a reminder that during executive session, board is not allowed to adopt any proposed policy, resolution, or regulation or take any formal action. So there's a motion on the table by Director Hansen to go ahead and move into executive session tonight under that statutory allowance. Is there a second? Seconded by Long. Any further discussion? Okay, in order to go into executive session, we need a 2/3 affirmative vote. Let's see, I think that's all I need. So we'll go ahead and vote to go into executive session. Director Chancha-Shore,
No.
Graziano,
Aye.
Hanson,
Aye.
Holtzman,
Aye.
Lung,
Aye.
Meek,
Aye.
and Ray is an aye, so that passes 6-1. And then what I failed to ask for the motion is to adjourn the regular session. So can we make a motion real quick to adjourn regular session?
Motion adjourned.
Director Lung has motion adjourned, seconded by? Second. By Graziano. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. So we are now closing up regular session, and we'll move into executive session into the superintendent's conference room. The only other additional person that will be with us is Dr. Tucker.